was more to challenge what you said about, sort of trying to compare climate change and, anti-climate change scientists with anti-lockdown corona scientists. I don't think it's in the same remit at all.
Why not, mate?
Because epidemiology, public health, virology, immunity is not one consensus. Does not work like that.
Nor's climate science. That was my point.
Yeah, in that view, but climate change is much more sort of recorded, isn't it, between years and years and years.
Not necessarily the anthropocentric side of it. Until very, very recently, you wouldn't be able to talk about it without having to then invite somebody on to deny it.
Okay, I'm not saying I'm not talking about denial. I'm not talking about a denial. If we're trying to say that, if we take, I think it's Sunetra Gupta, is it the one who's on the Great Barrington Declaration?
Who? Sorry, I think I genuinely didn't hear what you said then.
I can't think of the main lady from Oxford on the Great Barrington Declaration.
Sunetra Gupta, the zoologist.
Sorry, thanks for correcting me.
Yes. Professor of Theoretical Epidemiology at the Department of Zoology, University of Oxford.
So if you paint that lady with the same sort of rhetoric, then it doesn't seem very fair, because you're trying to say that those scientists have to be tarnished with your against this consensus, what you just said before.
But she is against the consensus.
How many people do you know personally that are within the consensus?
Well, all of Sage and all of Independent Sage.
People who are within the consensus.
Oh, mate, you asked me a question. I'm just going to answer it. As a layman, I point to the government scientific advisors, and then I point to the independent body set up to argue.
Who appoints a scientist for the government?
Yeah, but you asked me a question about where the consensus comes from. So independent Sage...
The consensus
James, you have to let me finish, because the independent Sage was... Independent Sage was set up precisely because of concerns that government Sage might be in the pocket of the government, and they are all part of the consensus with regard to lockdowns and circuit breakers.
But the WHO doesn't believe in lockdown, so their opinion, that doesn't matter.
Well, you've moved the ball again now. The WHO hasn't gone on the record saying it doesn't believe in lockdowns. It's gone on the record saying nothing will succeed unless it is supported by test, trace and isolate. Now, if you've got brilliant test, trace and isolate in place, you can avoid some of the more severe lockdowns. But, that's the scientific consensus, and you've got a problem with scientific consensus, or at least you did a minute ago.
I don't have a problem with scientific consensus.
Right.
I have a problem when people are highlighting that they must be wrong. That's what you more or less...
Not that they must be wrong, no, because that's what consensus means, isn't it? That's a majority view. I tell you what, if you listen to me, then you might not make quite as many mistakes about what it is you think I've said. So what he's off again. Go on, mate.
You're voicing to a lot of people what is wrong and what is right and who is right.
No, I'm not. I'm voicing consensus and then dissenting... No, you're off again. James, stop talking just for 1 minute, please, all right? Because you didn't understand what I said, and I think that's probably my fault rather than yours. So what you have in the context of consensus is a view that is supported by a massive majority of what we would call, for the sake of argument, qualified scientists. Now, you rightly point out that we will always be able to find a few who don't agree with the consensus and who dissent. Well, you've managed not to name one, James, because you couldn't remember her name, and now you're laughing at the idea that there aren't many. And now you're talking again rather than listening. So let me try again. You couldn't even name one, and now you're laughing at the idea that there aren't many of them. You see, now, in the old days, I'd be quiet and I'd insist that you now name 5 off the top of your head if suggesting that there aren't many of them is laughable. But I won't do that because it would be cruel.
People didn't know who Chris Whitty was or Patrick Vallance before that.
But they do now, James.
So to tell me that I need to name people is not the point that I make.
I didn't say you had to name people. I said if you laugh at the idea that there aren't many of them, then you will be the one that ends up looking silly. So let me just finish, and then we can avoid these mistakes. No,
that's not the point I make. I'm not looking silly at all. I'm trying to say that it's unfair to state that you have a platform.
But nobody did they? Nobody did. This is the bit you didn't listen to 2 minutes ago, as opposed to the bit you didn't listen to 20 minutes ago. Consensus is a majority view. citing people who disagree with the majority view is important. I normally at this point mention Thomas Kuhn's paradigm shifts because they explain this process better than anybody does. The point I made was that if, for the sake of argument, 90% of scientists qualified in the relevant field believe X and 10% believe Y, then the responsible thing for a media to do is to provide 10% of coverage to the people who believe Y and 90% to the people who believe X. If we treat them as if they are opposite and equal forces or balanced or equivalents, people like you end up on the radio doing what you just did.